Ngā mihi nui and welcome to this edition of Sector Report, in which we take a look at one of the biggest events on the calendar for global dairying. Auckland has just played host to a huge gathering of 2,200 delegates to the World Dairy Summit. There was a babble of foreign tongues to be heard in the breaks from the conference as experts from all over the globe got down to detail. We visited this massive gathering and talked to the man who runs America's National Milk Producers Federation, Jerry Kozak, and the Chief Executive of Friesland Campina, the Fonterra of the Netherlands. We also go on the road to visit farms with overseas delegates keen to learn about sustainable dairy farming, Kiwi style. But first, Jerry Kozak. Well, Jerry, welcome to the Sector Report program here on Country 99 TV. Now, let's start with politics. We've all watched the midterm elections with some fascination. But what will a Republican-controlled House of Representatives mean for dairy farmers in America?
Well, you know, John, thanks for having me this morning. It's a great question. We've always had a basically bipartisan support in agriculture. So, you know, I think that although there'll be some changes, I don't think there'll be as many influences on ag with a Republican-controlled House. Certainly from our perspective, right. We've worked with both sides of the aisle.
Would they tend to vote Republican anyway with that party's emphasis on small government?
You know, let's be fair here. Our farmers are basically conservative people. Now, what party they vote for is obviously based on a lot of issues. But I would say that, again, in our field of agriculture, both Republican and Democrats have supported the dairy industry.
You've told the conference that government regulation is an issue for dairy farmers, particularly over the environment. What sort of government regulation actually gets their backs up?
Over-regulation. I mean, I'll give you a quick example. Yeah. We have what they call a spill control regulation, and it's intended to prevent oil spills out on the farms. But somehow the EPA bureaucrats have labeled milk bulk tanks to be in the same category as oil and fuel tanks. And so therefore they want to regulate those in the same manner. It's really a bureaucratic folly. And so those are the kinds of things that do rile our farmers up.
What about waste disposal, pesticides?
Well, sure, there's that. But, you know, one of the things I think we have to bear in mind, and I think this is true of all the farmers in the world, farmers want to be able to be profitable. And in order to do that, they have to be great stewards of their own land, and they have to take care of their animals. And if they don't do those two things, then we're not going to have a profitable organization. So our farmers are very committed, just as I'm sure your farmers are certainly committed here, to being good environmental stewards and proper care of our animals.
And the US has a good standard of animal welfare?
Yeah, we do. In fact, we're very proud because 2 years ago we initiated a program called FARM, and it's Farmers Assuring Responsible Management. It's our way of being very proactive. We have a lot of animal rights activists, and I'm sure you have them here.
Indeed.
And their whole agenda is to is to eliminate livestock agriculture from the diet. How we'll feed the population, I don't know, if they had their way. But in order to accomplish that, we're doing all the right things. In order for us to be successful, we always have to do the right things. And therefore, then we have a good story to tell. So our farm program now has a verification program. So, because it's not just good enough to tell our customers and the consumers that we're doing something, you have to verify it. And so we're pretty proud of what's happening there in the United States.
Now, subsidies are an issue, at least for those of us trading with the US, but who don't have subsidies for their own farmers. Would any American government ever try to cut farmers loose from the comfort of that money coming from Washington so they can keep farming?
Well, I think it's been happening. I think if you look at the farm bill, that most of the money in our farm bill goes to nutrition, feeding programs, the women and infants and children, food stamps, etc. I think it's almost over 90% of the farm bill goes to those areas. In addition, one of the things that we're advocating is to wean our way away from our basic milk pricing formulas, which I think is in the right direction. But also, let me say this, we are absolutely in favor of a successful Doha round, because we think the way to achieve the best discipline worldwide is to have a multilateral agreement.
Now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, do you see that becoming a reality?
Well, you know, any kind of free trade agreement is basically equivalent to a business deal. And as good business people, and just like our farmers, we've got to evaluate, well, what's in it for us? And certainly, again, we are in full agreement with trade pacts, but there are certain portions of the trade pact that we have to take a careful look at.
Now, you are part of a large group that's often seen in a pretty negative light in Washington, a lobbyist. What do you lobby for on behalf of dairy farmers? Subsidies would be a big one, would it?
It would, but you know, the word subsidy is a misnomer. Right. For instance, we represent dairy farmers in Washington, and of course, as you're right, sometimes the word lobbyist comes with negative connotations. Yeah. But you know, when you look at our organization, we represent 32 co-ops with about 40,000 farmers who own those co-ops, and we make representations on their behalf. For instance, for taxes, a good issue in our country is the estate tax. You know, we're concerned that farm families have the ability to transfer their farms to their families without a huge cut in that equity that they've built up over the years. So there's a good example that we represent their interest on trying to do estate taxes. We do many things on the economic side. We represent them in regulatory issues, both at the Food and Drug Administration, at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, and also at the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. So we have a multifaceted organization.
Can we talk sustainability? Now, what's the approach to sustainable production by both American dairy farmers and consumers?
Well, there's another case where we've been very proactive, along with our sister agencies on promotion. You know, we realized early on that sustainability was something that we needed to be involved in. We don't want the retailers to dictate to us what is sustainable at the farm level. Yeah. And the only way to accomplish controlling your own destiny is to do all the right things again. So we've set out, we just recently completed our own life cycle analysis on our carbon footprint. Certainly a lot of it falls at the farm level in production, as you heard yesterday. But when you look at the analysis, it shows that we've made considerable progress in this area, and it's certainly far less than what the World Health Organization had predicted. So we've got a number of programs, research programs, even directed at the nutrition feeding habits of cows, which has something to do with the elimination of methane.
Yes, well, that's a problem for us here too. You say there's a lot of misinformation about sustainability. Can you give me some examples?
Well, you know, as an example, and you've seen it probably here at times, you know, there's the notion that larger farms are creating more environmental problems. And yet when you do the analysis and look at some of the things that we've looked at, you find out that most of the time, larger farms are actually in a better situation of managing their waste. We've got methane digesters. We're converting those kinds of things to electricity and energy to our grid. And so I think that's a misconception that sometimes is out there.
Well, thanks very much for taking time out from the conference, and welcome to New Zealand, Jerry. I hope you enjoy the rest of your visit here.
I am, and thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Jerry Kozak of America's National Milk Producers Federation there. When I return, I catch up with a range of delegates from all around the world and join 5 busloads of them on farm visits to see just how New Zealanders handle dairy farm sustainable production.
The 2010 World Dairy Summit is officially open. Thank you.
The World Dairy Summit is a huge event for New Zealand in general and our dairy industry in particular. 2,200 delegates have come together in Auckland, meaning a nice economic spin-off for the city of at least $6 million. These delegates are from 66 different countries, to name but a few: Chile, Brazil, Russia, South Africa, Australia, France, Denmark, and all points between. There have been 7 different technical tours, one of which we join later in this field report. But first, let's hear what some of the delegates had to say about their own industry back home and what they think of New Zealand's dairying expertise.
Very impressed with the New Zealand system. Went to visit a few farms in Cambridge and hope to visit a few more in New Zealand before I go back. But the efficiency levels, unbelievable.
And what do you think we do the best? The efficiency thing?
I'd say efficiency, and then also, labour efficiency is unbelievable.
Of course, I guess Ireland is probably the closest place to us in terms of climate and pasture growth. But what do you think sets New Zealand apart from other countries in dairy production?
Well, I think one of the things from our point of view is the milk processing sector, which is very integrated. You have Fonterra as the main player, and I suppose there are similarities with our industry in terms of our production base, but in terms of our processing base, there's a very strong contrast.
Norway is a small country, small-scale farms, costly, and so on. So the difference between the way you produce milk here in Oceania and in Norway is quite huge. But the product is common, the challenge is common, and so on. That's it.
What do you think New Zealand does the best?
Well, in some way, they are a leading training company. They are one of the leaders in technology and so on. So, you are one of the best.
It's completely different because you were pasture-based and we fed all grains, all imported, like US or European style. Probably not many people know that Japan has nearly 20,000 dairy farmers and 2 million dairy cows. It's all, and we have a very high import tariff from abroad to protect our own business. And that's one of the point I come over here to know you.
Yes, exactly.